Just a reminder for folks to just first off, Happy New Year. Welcome back. It's so exciting to see everyone. I'll be chairing today's meeting. Chair Wendy is out for today, so I have the honor and pleasure of chairing today's meeting. Just a reminder for folks, just to make sure you stay on mute. Unless you have a question, raising your hand is very helpful for me and for folks on here to make sure we can call on you, but know that we can ask questions at the end of the presentation during our question and answer sessions that we have. And as I mentioned earlier for folks, unless you may have missed this earlier, the meeting is being recorded, and that's due to our city's policy on capturing and recording meetings on decision-making bodies. With that being said, I'll call this meeting to order at 7:02. Melissa, can you call the attendance, please?
Yeah, of course. Okay, I'm going to start with Commissioner Zisser.
Present.
Okay, and Vice Chair Magana.
I am present.
Commissioner Rentakar. Okay. Absent. And Commissioner Thorson. And Commissioner Chair Mahaney-Guru is out today. And so Commissioner Mendoza.
Here.
So Commissioner Kelly. Commissioner Jolly.
Here.
Commissioner Ramos.
Here.
And Commissioner Allen. And Commissioner Malillo. We'll have him as well. To the next slide. And we have.
Is that six
So
commissioners?
Six. Yeah, 6 commissioners present, so no quorum.
All right, so we currently do not have a quorum, folks. So because of that, we unfortunately cannot approve the items on the consent calendar, minus approving the agenda for today. So what we will do is first start off on, I believe, approving the agenda. Is that correct?
Oh, it looks like Commissioner Jolly has her hand raised, but we actually can't take any actions today, so we'll take the agenda as presented.
Awesome. The agenda as presented. Sorry, y'all. I'm trying to get set up here with different screens. Awesome. We'll move on to the public record. And sorry, did we say we had a hand raised?
Commissioner Jolly did have her hand raised, but it came down. Commissioner Jolly, did you have a question?
I was just going to ask about quorum, but that discussion just happened.
Awesome. Cool. We'll move on then to, thank you, Commissioner Jolly. We'll move on to the public record. Just to note that there has been no correspondence received. That is correct?
That's correct. No correspondences.
Awesome. With that being said, we'll move on now to our open forum. If there's any members of the public that wish to comment on an item not on the agenda today, those wishing to speak, please raise your hand via our Zoom function, and we'll be calling on folks. Just a reminder, folks have a maximum of 2 minutes. Do we have any folks that are hoping to speak for the open forum?
I see no hands raised.
Okay. Seeing none, I think we can then move on to our next item, which is our discussion and our action items. On the first action item that we will be, taking a step back, first discussion item that we will be talking about. It's an informational item regarding our bond program. Our Library Deputy Director, Jenny Choi, will provide some information on our current bond program.
I'm muted, which is good because I addressed somebody in the wrong way. Thank you, Chair, Acting Chair, and thank you all for attending tonight. It's nice to see everybody. Happy-ish New Year, happy 2022. I'm here to provide just a brief informational update on the bond program. And if you recall, back in October of 2020, we did an update on this bond project. However, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, we did have to kind of delay our planning and our action on this project. So it is also my pleasure to announce we have a fairly new capital and facilities program manager. She'll be joining us towards the end of this presentation. Her name is Ann Tran, and some of you might recognize her from council meetings, as she was formerly of the Office of Emergency Management, and she's also the Vaccine Task Force Director. We're extremely fortunate to have her join our amazing library team, and she's been here since, I believe, September, just this past September, and she's kind of hit the ground running. That being said, I'm going to kick us off on a brief review of the status of our library bond. Next slide, please. So as you recall, back in September of 2000, that was 22 years ago, we passed the Measure O bond measure, and that actually resulted in approximately $200 million. $200 million, and the full measure included the construction of 6 new library branches, as well as 16 expansions and renovations, all in line with the branch master facilities plan. Also, that was a pretty large project that spanned over multiple years. I believe the last branch was completed in 2016. That was our Village Square branch. So even our newest branch is almost 6 years old. And if you recall, numerous stakeholders were involved in the entire process of the bond measure. And in 2019, we did have one remaining bond in the amount of 5.9 million. So we actually issued that bond in 2019 with the intent to utilize it in the following fiscal year. However, that was 2020, and we did run into our pandemic. Let me see. So as we go into fiscal year 2022-23, we are going to pick up the resumption of this, resume the planning of this project. And next slide, please. And this is just a historical look back at all the projects. I believe we included this attachment in your report, so you can take a look and see what we actually spent. And these are all the budgeted constructions costs. It indicates which libraries were new and then which ones were renovated or expansion projects. So this is just a historical look back in all of those bond projects that we had already completed. Next slide. And just to give you some context, so with this most recent $5.9 million bond, if you recall, the intent of this bond was to address our oldest branches and the ones that had not been renovated in the previous round. So those 3 branches would have included El Viso, West Valley, and Biblioteca. And these branches were actually at that time fairly new or recently renovated right before that bond measure went into place. Obviously, since it was such a long time ago, there were some improvement discussions that we had need to be had around these branches. And our initial look, we looked at all 3 branches, used what we had a condition assessment report done by our Public Works Department. And so they went through branch by branch and they kind of assessed all the needs. I think it's almost like a 20-year span, trying to anticipate the maintenance and facilities needs that would come up around routine maintenance. And some of our branches were significantly more costly to kind of address these projects. For example, is El Viso. Many of you know it's a very old branch. It's located in a flood zone. So we looked at all of the needs at that branch. We kind of have not engaged in the community process for any of these yet, but we will, and I'll get to that a little bit later. And then West Valley, I believe, was was reconstructed as part of the branch facilities master plan, as I mentioned. So it was fairly new at the time. And looking at the maintenance needs of all 3 of these branches, it was determined that the best fit and the best benefit from the remaining bond balance would be at our Biblioteca Latino America branch. Next slide. Oops, sorry. Before I get to the project planning process, I did want to share a brief summary of how this funding is allocated currently. So in our current budget, we are planning to use a portion of the 5.9 million to address bond eligible branch facility priority projects, which also came out of our condition assessment planning, as well as our book locker installations that we picked up that project kind of at the beginning of the pandemic. looking to utilize a self-service book locker model to be able to help provide more accessible hours for materials pickup as we were, during the closures, and it'll help us kind of supplement our services as we look to resume service expansion and get our hours back. So the remaining bond funds will be used to cover the development of a design plan for the Biblioteca branch with a robust community engagement process. And then subsequently, we would put together a full building program and project development. So obviously that project budget may change as we gather a better understanding of our project needs and also our community needs. We really want this to be a renovation project that addresses and includes community feedback and what that community really wants from the library. So we will have to take a look at this once we have the community feedback and our design plan in place, how we can best strategize and leverage our funds in the short and long term. Obviously, 5.9 million is not a lot of money, so we'll have to kind of take some assessments about how we can strategize around the funding of this. And then just so this group is aware, there are other discussions pending in our system about how we are going to address those other two branches, as well as all these increasing needs for upkeep on the rest of our branches. For context, as I mentioned before, Village Square is already 5 years old, so considerations that we've been talking about are possibly going out for another library bond, and also looking at coordination with other city departments. There are some other bond measures being discussed at the city level, so perhaps there's a joint capital measure we could consider. None of this is concrete yet, but we will seriously consider these as we move through this planning process. And I'm going to turn this over now to Anne so she can make her commission debut, and she will take us through the rest of the bond project planning process for this specific branch.
Thank you, Jenny. Good evening, commissioners. As Jenny has introduced, I am recently new with the library, and I came to the library from the City Manager's Office of Emergency Management. I'm very happy to be here, serving in the capacity of overseeing facilities, securities, and interbranch delivery. So the proposed bond project process for 21-22, we are looking to establish a bond development team, which consists of the library project team, which is me, a bond and capital bond analyst, as well as architects from the Public Works Department. And we are proposing that the LEC representative would join us, and then the Biblioteca Latinoamericana Friends of the Library representative would also be part of this development team. The bond development team is to engage in the comprehensive development of the building draft program. And this team will essentially work on the scope and coordinate the design plan review with the library executive leadership team, and then draft the full building program as we look into the design phase. And if the library budget can sufficiently fund the building program or portions of it, then we will move forward with the bid award process, and then the construction phase begins. So during all of these phases, the bond development team will meet frequently and conduct community meetings, updates, discuss proposed project, and gather community feedback. And then the team will update the commission as well as the city manager's office, engage our council district offices, and then the community stakeholders, as with the pandemic and ways that we have changed just how we work and how we engage with the public, and as well as utilize library resources. There's obviously opportunity for us to be more innovative, and it's critical that we gather community feedback so that we can plan for what a future library would look like. So in terms of duration, sorry. Okay. So in terms of duration, 1 month is to establish the bond development team, about another month to engage in the community outreach process. And I think this should happen in the beginning, the middle, and then in the closeout phase. And then, as Jenny has described, the design phase would take a little bit longer. And then obviously the project scoping award, that could take anywhere from 4 to 5 months to do, depending on how elaborate our scope is. And then finally, the construction phase, that's pretty much dependent on, again, how elaborate we, what we have funding for, and then what we can, what the community would like to see. So with that, I'm very excited to be part of this project. And if there's any questions, please let me know.
All right, thank you so much for a wonderful, wonderful presentation. Before we move on, obviously, we want to open up to questions. Do we have any folks that have any public comments on the items before we move on to questions from the commission? All right, let's open up the floor to questions. If anyone would like to go ahead, and it'd be helpful just for you, just for folks taking minutes, just to tell us who you are, quick intro of your name, and then ask a question. Open up the floor. Any questions? Or comments as well. I don't see any hands. I don't see anything on my end. Okay. Seeing none, thanks for a thorough presentation. I know I appreciated the numbers and the spreadsheet. I'll call it a spreadsheet. I really enjoyed being able to see that and some context behind that. So thank you so much. With that being said, we can move on to our next item around our library collections. Our senior librarian, Sharon Fung, will be providing an informational presentation on current library collections. As a reminder, questions at the end. Sorry for the previous one, it was only an informational item, so no vote was needed. Same thing for this one. Sharon, you have the floor.
Thank you. This evening, I'm going to talk a little bit about how we make decisions about our acquisitions budget, meeting ebook demand, collection work in diversity, equity, and inclusion, a couple of exciting projects, and how customers participate in building our collections. Next slide. The total acquisitions budget is $5,600,000. The parcel tax provides 17% of this budget. The construction and conveyance tax provides the bulk at 83%. The acquisitions budget pays for physical materials, electronic resources, processing costs, and sales use taxes. How we allocate these funds is largely based in how our materials are used, and that is represented by our circulation. The total circulation for last fiscal year is over 3.8 million. Some interesting facts about our circulation last year are that 12% of all circulation was for picture books, 4% of all of our circulation was for language materials, and this past fiscal year, there was also a 55% rise in ebook circulation and a 45% rise in e-audiobook circulation, which accounts for the total of 36% of our total circulation. Next slide. In addition to circulation, we make decisions about how to allocate acquisitions funds by looking at several factors: the turnover rate, the cost per item, fixed costs, as well as input from several sources that result in the acquisitions budget document that you see a small portion of here. So what are each of these factors? The turnover rate is the number of items divided by the number of circulations. For example, Lucky Day DVDs had a turnover rate of 6.6. Children's graphic novels has a turnover rate of 3.3. And this means that on average, every item in that collection circulated over 3 times, which is pretty good. The cost per item, which can range from just a few dollars for a children's paperback to more than $100 for an adult reference item, helps us determine how much money is needed to meet demand. Fixed costs are based not on circulation, but on community need. These decisions are made based on city and library priorities, selector input, and specific community needs, in some cases being given additional funding beyond what their raw circulation would warrant. Some of these collections are focused around system-wide initiatives like SJPL Works and a continuing focus on early education. Overall, for the acquisitions budget, there's input coming from city priorities, ELT and strategic priorities, the collection development advisory team, staff survey, and the expertise of our selectors. All of these priorities, along with numbers-driven data around circulation and cost per item, drive our decisions on how to allocate our acquisitions budget. There are slight changes year to year that help build the story around what is needed most in our communities. Technical services and collection development strive to provide our customers with what they most want and need to enrich lifelong learning and services for all ages. And to meet unprecedented demand for electronic books and audiobooks as a result of the pandemic closures, the acquisitions budget took a dramatic turn in fiscal year 2021. Funds were focused on cost per circulation titles and simultaneous use titles to provide instant access to ebooks and e-audiobooks. Next slide. After library buildings needed to close in March of 2020, collection development noticed that more ebook items were on hold than ever before, leaving few items available at any one moment. To combat this drought of access, particularly with children's materials, funds were shifted to acquire popular ebook titles that are always available and only paid for when they're checked out. Children's ebooks increased in circulation from fiscal year 1920 to fiscal year 2021 by 86%. And this can be attributed to the lack of access to physical books and the reduced desire to share physical items during the pandemic while we still didn't have enough information about how the virus spread. This slide shows that the circulation of ebooks in the vertical bars is outpacing the spending in the green line, and it demonstrates the value of cost per circulation and simultaneous use titles. Next slide. Many e-audio collections were also made always available during this time, allowing instant access to a larger catalog of e-audiobooks. These include perennially popular series like Diary of a Wimpy Kid, Outlander, and Harry Potter, and a big collection of titles on anti-racism, fueled by demand spiking in June of 2020. For fiscal year 2021, simultaneous use circulations made up 2.5% of our total e-audio circulations. Next slide. In addition to keeping up with ebook demand, technical services staff were instrumental in supporting SJ Access by adding devices and hotspots to the catalog, preparing hotspots for school districts to distribute to their students, and updating records to get access to these items where it is most needed. Each of these tens of thousands of items went through the hands of technical services staff to create opportunities for connection to those who need it. Next slide. In other exciting work, this June, ebooks were made available to the passengers at San Jose International Airport through a Wi-Fi connection and a device called the pop-up library. No library card needed. Airport staff created a wonderful promotional video shared on Twitter, and in close partnership with them, circulation of these ebooks has continued to be popular. We're still learning how to best troubleshoot the physical devices and working out how to make sure they are functioning as expected. There are currently almost 400 titles to choose from and check out for 3 weeks. Next slide. We've continued to make connections and expand access to ebooks by creating a link between school districts' Sora ebook collections and the public library's Overdrive collection. Overdrive launched the Sora app to schools in September 2018. This allowed students to find their closest public library collection, but they needed a library card to check out materials. Starting in June of 2020, a more seamless integration between school collections and the public library collection were established, allowing students to check out materials using their school credentials as well. With five agreements between Overdrive and different school districts currently in place, we've expanded the school's ebook collections and made it easy for students to check out public library ebooks. And students at any school with SORA can still access the public library collection with their SJPL library card by linking their SORA account to the public library. Over the last 18 months, since the implementation of the first agreement, checkouts from SORA make up 7.7% of our total children's and teens circulation on Overdrive. There's expected growth in these connections, with potential schools and school districts to include Alum Rock School District, Oak Grove School District, Notre Dame High School, and Yerba Buena High School. Next slide, please. Collection development works in several ways to ensure that students and our entire community have access to a vast array of ideas and information, and actively promotes diversity, equity, and inclusion in our day-to-day work. We do this with diverse book lists. The staff picks teams led by collection development staff focuses on creating lists that celebrate specific cultural origins and also work on making sure that our regular book lists feature voices of all kinds. So that if you click on the 4th grade book list, just for example, you'll see a variety of voices reflected in both the authors and characters of those books. We do this with selection audits. Our selectors closely follow conversations around the publishing industry regarding the availability of DEI materials. Some selectors perform audits on specific orders before placing them, so they perform diversity checks at the individual order level. All our selectors utilize other tools available to us because the diversity of our collection is limited by what gets published in the first place. Staying abreast of publishing trends is an important way to make sure we aren't missing out on new opportunities to better our collection. We do this with the Collection HQ DEI analysis tool, shown here in part, which analyzes our collection based on book industry standards and communications, commonly called BISAC, subject headings, encompassing DEI topics. One of the most valuable things we can do is make sure the diversity of our collection is moving in the right direction. We can do this by tracking the percentage change over time and plan to create additional graphs and visuals as we collect more data. A lot is possible with this tool, including removing titles with DEI topic BISAC subject headings that are not truly representative. We continue to be a part of this conversation with other libraries in our area and across the nation. We are expressing interest to Collection HQ to develop their analysis tool to compare our collection percentages to other libraries of similar size. We are participating in conversations regarding DEI collections through library networking groups, like Urban Library Council's collection leaders, and closer to home, the Silicon Valley Library System Technical Services Managers Group. Our goal is to be well positioned to know if professional or academic guidelines become available. Next slide, please. Cataloging is also actively involved in DEI work and using inclusive subject headings, adding new updated subject headings and changing problematic ones to replace outdated terminology. For example, updating titles with the subject heading illegal aliens to undocumented immigrants, which is a national change. New catalog records from vendors are regularly checked for these terms and updated. In 2022, an additional 2 terms will be added for further inclusivity. This work is being done in response to and in concert with libraries across the nation and national organizations like the American Library Association. The ALA has written 2 resolutions to encourage the Library of Congress to take action and update problematic and non-inclusive subject headings without further delay. Next slide, please. To include authors with self-published works in our collection development, the library created the Author and Publisher Submissions Policy. This policy details how interested authors and publishers can submit their work to be considered for inclusion in the library's collection. Excuse me. There are also opportunities with library services to self-publish titles through BiblioBoard's Pressbooks and Short Edition. Local authors have produced 263 projects using Pressbooks. Using the Pressbooks platform, these creations can be made ready for independent publishing. Programs like the Graphic Novel Making Contest have curated and provided access to 645 submissions of locally created content using BiblioBoard Creator. And local authors continue to be highlighted through Local Lit, which just held its 9th anniversary event. Next slide, please. Short Editions story dispensers are available at 2 locations right now. The Village Square branch dispenser was funded through the Library Foundation specifically for this location. Excuse me. And West Valley branch is, as a pilot location, is one of our busiest locations where the dispenser was placed to increase visibility. We are currently looking at whether to expand pardon me. We are currently looking at whether to expand with additional dispensers as budget allows. The dispenser prints short stories and poems that can be read in 1, 3, or 5 minutes. Customers who can also access stories online through the Short Edition portal, selecting kids' stories, teen and adult stories, or poetry. While customers have access to Short Edition's international content, the library is building local content through contests. Spring Into Poetry Contest was the first contest for customers in April 2021. Next slide, please. Our collection is built and informed through customer input. We get this input in the form of circulation, what checks out and what doesn't, from the selector's attention to local and national media and social media, along with professional journals and reviews, and from purchase requests. We received over 7,000 purchase requests last fiscal year. Each time a suggest for purchase form is submitted, the customer is informed twice about the actions that will be taken once the request is received. The first is on the form itself, letting the customer know that notification of decision is not possible and to check the catalog in the future. And the second is an automatic pop-up window that ensures the customer that the subject area selectors consider each request and a reminder to check the catalog again. And while staff levels do not allow for individual responses, those purchase requests are closely reviewed and guide our collection development team to what our customers want and need. Collection development recognizes that there's some room for growth here and is currently considering adding an email address field on the form so that an automatic reply can be sent directly to the customer submitting the form, providing a third opportunity for customers to hear how their request will be handled, as we have heard feedback that some customers are not confident their request has been received when they do not receive a direct reply. Next slide, please. Often customers would also like to give us copies of books they'd like to see on our shelves. And while this thoughtful and generous gesture is appreciated, our library services vendors provide materials to us ready to go on the shelves. The addition of donated materials to the collection has a cost, mostly staff time, that ranges, depending on the type of material, from $39 to $77 per title. Next slide, please. Our current staffing model allows little room for the handling of individual titles in this manner, and is structured around ordering larger quantities of ready-to-go items, as is the standard practice throughout major urban public libraries. And while occasionally donated titles are accepted and added to the collection, the great majority of donated materials are managed by our Friends of the Library groups, who passionately work to sell those donated items to the benefit of library programming, and when possible, also the acquisition of new materials. Next slide, please. On the horizon for collection development and technical services this fiscal year, we'll be adding a new Chinese language ebook platform called HiRead to meet the growing demand for Chinese language ebooks. We have an exciting opportunity to build digital inclusion through tablets preloaded with content aimed at access for seniors, and we will continue our work with inclusive subject headings. Looking forward to next fiscal year, we are anticipating building our children's read-along collection, growing equity in audio offerings by having materials that do not require another device or internet access. And due to customer demand, rebuilding our magazine and newspaper offerings to complement our growing digital collection with a focus on world language magazines. Next slide. Thank you for your attention. Any questions for me?
Thank you so much for such a thorough presentation. I appreciate everything all the information you provided. Before we go into commission discussion, we do want to open up for public comment. Do we have any folks here for public comment before we get into commission discussion? I don't believe so. Okay. Just as a reminder, before we get into discussion, there's no action on this item. It's an informational item. So I'll open up the floor. If someone has a question, feel free to start us off, and then just state your name again, and we can call on folks raising their hands afterwards. So go ahead and get it started. I'll open up the floor to anyone just to start us off.
Okay. Well, I'll go. Thanks, Vice Chair. Aaron Zisser, been on the commission just a few months. Since I didn't have any questions on the last one, I'll just say welcome to Anne. And I'll just, I want her to get a flavor for the enthusiasm of this commission. And one thing I'll just say is, I recognize how important a job Anne has, given sort of the importance of brick and mortar in terms of, creating a welcoming environment for library goers, especially kids. So really appreciate her coming on board after the work she did during COVID for the city. I had a couple questions. I really appreciated the information about the DEI piece. I thought that was fascinating and super helpful, as always. Two questions. One, when we talk about whether something qualifies as a DEI material, does that include representation in the book, as opposed to sort of topical, sort of highlighting that culture, that ethnic background, versus just having a story that has nothing to do with race or culture, but featuring characters of color diverse communities?
Thank you for that question. Yeah, the DEI tool, the analysis tool that we're using, is almost entirely a numbers-based algorithm, if you will. So it's only looking at those BISAC subject headings. It has a lot of room for librarians to go in and tag or untag those items depending on the community that they live in and what we know now about a lot of different materials. A good example is Julie of the Wolves, which is a children's chapter book that is not necessarily representative of the groups that are in their subject headings. So it would be something that librarians would have to take the time to untag for us to really use that tool. It's really by the subject headings only at this point.
So yeah, and I was actually thinking of sort of the reverse problem, right? That's interesting what you just said. But the reverse problem being if you have a story that just normalizes, let's say, disability. There's a character in a wheelchair, let's say. But the story has nothing to do with the person being in a wheelchair. It's just one of the characters or a key character. And normalizing disability or normalizing race differences in terms of race among friends and so forth, that seems awfully important to say, look, you know, this is just a story, but any story should feature, you know, what our community looks like, right? So I guess I'm wondering if it's sort of undercounting because it's excluding those stories that don't sort of touch explicitly on top social justice topics or sort of explicitly address diversity, but nonetheless sort of feature diverse characters and things like that.
Yeah, certainly. It is probably doing both undercounting and overcounting.
Okay. No, I appreciate that. My other question is,
Commissioner, if I could add, sorry, I used to be a collection development librarian, so I love this topic as well. A lot of subject items are assigned multiple subject headings when they are issued out. You know, occasionally we do have to receive or order an item that we do original cataloging on, but most items have been cataloged already. And there are multiple subject headings assigned. And so I think Sharon is absolutely correct that I'm sure there are things missing and overcounted, but a lot of times a story like the one you just, that you just described would have as one of its multiple subject headings, a representation of, you know, an individual with a disability or the community. So, but sometimes they don't. So it isn't a perfect system.
Yeah, no, that's helpful to know. My other question was about the benchmarking you talked about in terms of comparing to other library systems. I guess I'm just curious, do we have those numbers that you showed, the 17% overall? Obviously some categories very high, 61% or whatever for, I guess that was teen fiction or something like that, which is very encouraging. Do we have any information that you can share about sort of how we measure up to other jurisdictions? Do we have a target that we're trying to reach? I know you said that's sort of those sort of standards. Sorry, that's my dog making incredibly strange noises in the background. The standards are sort of being developed still, but I'm just wondering if there's anything preliminary that you'd be able to share with us, because those numbers weren't overall terribly exciting. And then just sort of one other sort of question about that is, you showed the areas where we're doing quite well, where there's high percentages. I guess I'm curious what categories are bringing the average way down, right? You have 61% over here and, you know, 20% over there, but like where are the categories where we're really, you know, underperforming, I guess would be the other question about that.
Yeah. So as far as benchmarking is concerned, there isn't. Each library system is unique. Our communities are very different. And even though I would consider some of our peer libraries to of equal size, we'll say a place like San Diego or Sacramento, where we are similarly sized or similarly budgeted, our communities look different. So there's not really a standard of DEI collection percentage that you can aim for based on what other libraries have. It's always interesting to know, and so it can be a point of discussion for how, like, say for example, San Diego has a high level of Arabic character books. You want to know, oh, we would like some more. Where did you get them? How can we build our collection that way? So that's for benchmarking. Also, I also said, but maybe subtly said, that all of the content of our collection can only be as good as what is published. So if there are not materials in DEI subjects published, we cannot purchase them. So that is also part of the equation when we're analyzing for DEI subject headings and things like that. And what was the third part?
The last one was about sort of categories where we are, the percentages aren't
Oh,
quite
yeah.
high.
Let's see. I was only able to put some of the subjects on the slide. There are 13 in total. I think there are 7 or 8 on the screen. I didn't choose them for any particular reason. I think it was just space.
That's fine. Do you think you could just shoot that over to staff for them to circulate the complete list and percentage breakdown? That's my dog again. So.
He agrees. Yes, I can send that as well.
Right. Any other question? I'm guessing we'll put a pause for a second. Any other questions from any other commissioner? Commissioner Thorson.
I was just curious. Thank you for such a thorough presentation. I was just curious how you settled on the collection HQ tool. It looks like it was recently added to the vendor's arsenal of tools. So I'm guessing there may not be too many tools with collection analysis in that area, but was just curious about how you chose it.
The library has used Collection HQ for other things since 2012. Mostly we use it to analyze the usage of our collection. The DEI tool is brand new. It just came out in August, and so we've been using it since then. It is the only tool that I know of that does this work.
Great, thank you.
Welcome.
Other questions from other commissioners? Going through, looking for some hands. Awesome. I know I definitely have a question. This is, first off, this is exciting info. I know my family definitely took advantage of the e-resources that you reviewed. Big fans, honestly. First, a point on, interesting on the DEI front, the highest percentage for teens was mental health, which is like a common theme that I'm hearing from students through my work on the school board and through my previous role, excuse me. So I just want to point that out, that was important to highlight. The question I did have though is, when it comes to SORA, what type of engagement do families and students get on how to use the program, how to access the program? I'm just thinking of how we might be able to increase some engagement there.
Sure. The library has, the public library has an agreement with Overdrive, and school districts that have SORA or schools that have SORA also have an agreement with Overdrive. In some cases, I think in 5 cases, we have an agreement with the school also. Often we have, actually some of the images on the slide were little thumbnail images that are included on letters to the school. So especially when we're issuing school library cards, there's a note about using Sora if that school has Sora. But a lot of engagement comes from the Overdrive side as well. So Overdrive is connecting with the school districts also, because they already have a relationship of a vendor relationship with Overdrive. So they're getting engagement from two sides, from the library and from Overdrive.
That's super helpful. That's all the questions I had. I'll open up the floor one more time for any other questions on this presentation. Going through, I don't believe so. Again, thank you so much for such a thorough presentation. I know I really enjoyed that information. Thank you for everything that you're doing, and we appreciate your time. As a reminder for folks on the commission, this is an informational item, so no vote is needed. So we will move on to our next item. Thank you again for your, again, thorough presentation.
Thank you.
All right, so moving on to our next item, we're moving on to another informational item, which is around our King Library joint use. Our wonderful library director, Jill Bourne, and our wonderful deputy director, Michelle Arnett, will lead us in the review of the King Library joint use framework.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Magana, and good evening, everyone. So I'm just going to introduce Michelle, and she's going to take us through this as crisply as we can. There's a lot of information. We did feel that, you know, the Martin Luther King Jr. Library is really an incredible partnership, and it is the largest joint use between a university and a city library still to this day. It's been in place for over 18 years. And I think that we sometimes take for granted this main library that we have. And we know we've had a lot of new commissioners, and I don't think we've done a report like this in a very long time, at least in my time here. So we wanted to do a review of the joint use framework and then provide some updates about some current usage changes that had been made. And so I'm going to turn it over to Michelle.
Thanks, Jill. Good evening, everybody. Good evening, commissioners. Next slide, please. So like Jill said, the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Library is an innovative collaboration between the city of San Jose and San Jose State, which is 18 years old at this point. And it serves as our main branch of the San Jose Public Library System and also as the university library. And it is the first library in the US to integrate the services and collections of a major university and a city, making them all available to everyone in the campus and public communities. The library spans 9 floors. It's approximately 475,000 square feet, and there are seating for over 3,500 patrons. A lot of room for studies, study rooms, meetings, and also over 1.5 million volumes are available for circulation and also in special collections. Next slide. The joint library mission is to provide city residents and the university community with a high quality, dedicated library, providing excellent service to all of its users and providing access to an extensive collection of library materials. Excuse me. Next slide. The joint operating agreement is the agreement for ownership and operation of the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Library building. This operating agreement, which is publicly available and online, details the responsibilities and functions of each party. It is comprised of the organization of the library, including space designation, allocations, and improvements, governance of the joint library, including jurisdiction, library building, and library operations. Of significant note for this very brief presentation are the following: the organization of the library and its space designation and use. You see here that space is allocated between the university and the city. And in addition to city and university allocated space, there is shared space and common space. 33.5% of the designated city space includes sections of the library, such as the children's room and the We Explore Play space and the California room. With regard to governance, the city library director, Jill Bourne, and the university library dean, Michael Math, co-manage the library, which is governed by our joint library operating agreement. And under library building, This agreement lays out the obligations for things like building maintenance, utilities, capital repair, insurance, and security. And you'll see a little bit more about that with regard to the budget in a couple slides. And also the library operations describe the use of library collections, lending policies, library access staff, and programs. Next slide. Oh, and there's the budget. Included here are the annual costs to operate King Library. And this is shared between SJPL and San Jose State. Now, the shared expense splits were agreed upon in the joint operating agreement. Items under facilities operations include things like custodial staff. Supplemental maintenance include things like window washing and escalator maintenance. Security services include the 50% shared cost of security staff that support King Library. And then also annual property insurance premiums and IT services such as network and telephony support. Next slide. There are two specific points of the joint agreement which govern access and collections. Unrestricted access to all library material within the library collections and services within the joint library for all members of the general public and the university users. And the second point is that members of the general public and the university shall have the right to the on-site use of the library collections. The rules and regulations must apply uniformly to both the members of the general public and the university users. With regard to collections, all San Jose residents have access to the books in the academic collection of San Jose State University Library. And San Jose State students also have access to everything in the public library's collection. In addition, many of San Jose State's electronic databases, such as business databases and streaming video music databases, things like that, they can also be accessed by anyone at the building. Next slide. And as many of you know, SJPL has distinct spaces within the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Library. And those range from our children's room, the We Explore Play Space, the Teen HQ Center, and it also serves as the main point out of which our youth services unit works. Also, we have the California room, which is the library's local history collection, which is located on the 5th floor. And that room contains the materials on California history with an emphasis on the city of San Jose and the greater Santa Clara Valley. And lastly, then we have our King Public Reference and Research on the 3rd floor, and also SJPL Works, which many of you are familiar with. They provide economic and workforce development resources for employment seekers, small business owners, and entrepreneurs. And there are program pieces such as Partners in Reading, Lawyers in the Library, and Social Workers, which are also housed at King. Next slide. One of the biggest highlights of the joint library is that it is home to an incredible display of public art entitled Recolecciones. And Recolecciones is a Spanish word for recollections, as in memories, and it can also mean harvests or gatherings. Part of the city of San Jose's ongoing commitment and longstanding commitment to the arts, the San Jose Public Art Program commissioned artist Mel Chin to create artwork that was integrated into the new library. Mel Chin, he's an internationally recognized artist known for creating artworks in a broad range of media and scale. And he has produced artworks that combine cross-cultural aesthetics and complex ideas, including art that addresses political and ecological issues. There are 34 artworks located through the library and are designed to pay homage to the library's book collections. All of these artworks are really designed to provoke interest and curiosity, to encourage exploration and also circulation throughout the library. And the artworks vary from large dramatic statements to small insertions that are pretty hard to find. The great thing about the library is that we do provide docent tours, which not right now we're not, but we will be hoping to resume that, anticipated in later in spring. And the docent tours are a really great way to learn about these artworks and to learn more information and get more in-depth information. Next slide. Between August 16th and November 30th of this last year, SJSU initiated a pilot in an effort to buffer students from interaction with members of the public as part of the university's repopulation plan. And this is important to note because this is the first time that this had been done since the library had been open jointly. And the scope of the pilot was to restrict access to floors 6 through 8 as a designated study space for SJSU students and faculty who at the time had verified vaccination status. The impact on SJPL was that public patrons could not browse university collections or view art, use one of the 40 study rooms, or access spaces. University items, though, could be reserved and retrieved, and they were available eventually in about 30 minutes or so during regular business hours when patrons wanted to try to access them while they were in the building. As we assess the impact of closing those floors to the public, we know that 27% of the square footage of the building and 41% of the public art is located on those floors, as well as over 50% of reader seats, almost 50% of study tables and seating, and 81% of the study rooms, so not quite all 40, or on floors 6 through 8. Public patrons who did inquire about access during the closure were both confused and disappointed at the lack of access to these spaces. And feedback was given to us both in person, anecdotally, and also via ref chat and email. There was also inquiry from local media as well. Given the incomplete data on SJSU student and faculty usage, the pilot was deemed untenable to continue and thus ended in the end of November. Next slide. We go into, we are into 2022, San Jose Public Library, the staff, we are committed to working together to create a truly joint user experience and engagement and looking at opportunities to activate shared spaces and exploring a human-centered design process. There will be changes to the first floor coming up with the addition of a Starbucks. And also we're looking at the exploration of possibility of a more robust and interactive retail space on the 4th and San Fernando slide. We're also continuing to support staff-led programs and project collaborations, including programs like Local Lit, special collections projects and exhibits, including cataloging of microfilm projects, and also of utmost importance, the resumption of operating hours. Next slide. Thank you for your time, and we are happy to answer any questions.
Thank you again, y'all, for such a thorough presentation. I appreciate all the info that you're providing. Similar to before we get into commission discussion and questions, I believe we do have a public comment. As a reminder for folks that are here for public comment, you have 2 minutes, and we can go from there. I believe we have Mr. Soto, correct?
Yes.
Awesome. Mr. Soto, just a reminder, we have 2 minutes, and I will let you know when that time has completed.
Good evening, Paul Soto from the Horseshoe. It was very, very disorienting for me to hear this, read it, that there was restrictions to space in a Martin Luther King library. Think about that. Let that just sink in, because whoever's the genius that came up with this idea, you need to fire him. You need to just fire him, just get rid of him, because this was a good idea for this person. Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, let's restrict space in a Martin Luther King Jr. library. I mean, just wow, clueless, very, very clueless. And so that tells me that the people that are running the show there are disconnected. They don't understand what they're doing, who they're doing it with, and be quite honest with you, probably don't care. So it's just, it's frustrating for me especially because you had diversity, inclusion, and equity on the agenda, and then that. I mean, the people that are running or trying to implement these programs, they don't have an understanding or a comprehension of what they're doing, because you don't have people like me on these committees. I'll teach you about racial equity because I have the history of racial inequity in my history. Remember, 6th generation Chicano from San, and I got papers directing my lineage to the Mission San Diego. My ancestry is that I'm a descendant of the people that built the Mission San Diego. So, I mean, I'm really disappointed because there's a cognitive dissonance that has been rationalized here, and no one's calling it out. I guess I have to. Thank you.
there any other public comment or any other folks raising their hand for public comment? All right, Tina, and I'll open the floor. Before that, oops, there's the timer. Sorry about that. Thank you to our staff for, again, a thorough presentation for the work that you're doing during these challenging times. But we'll open up the floor. I think Commissioner Ramos, Alan, I believe I saw your hand up first. So we'll open up the floor and then go from there.
Great, thank you. Michelle, could you do me a little bit of a favor and go back to the slide on how much we pay? I just wanted to go back to that and kind of, I have a lot of questions and I don't want to waste anyone's time because I'm a little confused by it. So I just want to try and be as efficient as I can by asking this question. And so I see that that our annual operating costs, we pay about $3 million to San Jose State. Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
Can you, because I am still a new commissioner and I'm not entirely, I'm not 100% well read on the history of the library and its building. Can somebody from staff remind me or enlighten me as to how much the city paid and how much the taxpayers paid for this building, if any? If not, it's totally fine too.
Yeah, I actually don't have those numbers at my fingertips and I wouldn't want to misquote them. So unless one of my team is accessing it, but we can definitely bring that back to you. It is a good question. And it's one of the reasons why we wanted to provide this information, because I don't think that it gets discussed enough that this is a major investment that the city has made in this building and in the shared governance.
And then I guess as a process question for myself, this is an information item, obviously. And so I guess a question I have, as a commissioner, like I find it concerning that we did restrict access. We did get an email about it to our commission emails from a member of the public. And there are a lot of reasons why I'm a little worried about that. But I guess, my focus at this moment is the fiscal aspect. If the taxpayers are paying, have been paying and have paid for this building and potential operating costs, I'm concerned that that limiting access to the public for some of these items is not very good governance. I would say, as somebody who has accessed those the university collections in the past, as a member of the public and not a student of San Jose State, I'm not entirely thrilled about that, and I'm wondering if there is any history as to why this pilot had been put into place. Was it reactionary to something? Was it in service of something else, of something bigger than everything, than that, and see what the decision-making process was in weighing the taxpayer access to a public building versus that type of thinking and decision-making. Yes.
Yeah, it's a great question. It is the question, really. And I think that, Michelle and all of us are being as positive as we can because the pilot is over. I hope that it's clear, because we are sharing this information, and this presentation was actually created for the commission earlier when we were concerned that the pilot was not ending. It was proposed when the building wasn't open yet, keep in mind. And at that point in August, when we were beginning to discuss reopening, the city had not adopted any vaccination requirements for staff, for anybody, for large groups, as now have been put in place, but the university had. So we're in this very challenging moment of needing to get our building open, and the university feeling very strongly that they needed spaces that were where students with verified vaccination status could be. It was very, I will just share, it's been very challenging as a public librarian to go through this. And it is the reason that we prepared this data, is that if you only think about a public library as a storehouse for books, then you may see less usage in historic university collections on upper floors. But we know that a public library isn't just a storehouse for books. And so we started to have to tell that story, that it is an enormous amount of space. It is public art. It's a public building that was invested in by the city. And it's reader seats, and it's study tables, and it's space that is intended for all of our residents to use. And so I can credit that we're still in a scary moments with COVID, right? And it keeps coming back, but it was a very scary time during reopening the buildings. And I think that that's why the decision was made to allow for a pilot. And our goal was just to see that the pilot would end, and that we could have the space open to everybody and be safe for everybody. So now if I answer your question, I do think it's important that we wanted to make sure to have this discussion about the importance of keeping the building open to all.
Thank you. I just have, I know that there's other people who have questions. I do have another, one more question. What would be the potential of this? It's clear that there is insufficient data on to how many students and faculty used these floors, and clearly there was public unhappiness about it. And if I had tried to access, I probably would have been very unhappy. I'm now curious to know, as both a process and risk assessment question, what is the likelihood that that something like this could potentially be proposed again in the future? And I know I'm not asking, I guess I shouldn't ask you to look into a crystal ball, but based on maybe past experience or past history and historical conversations in partnership with San Jose State, I'm hoping that perhaps I'm hoping that the conversations moving forward are fruitful as you move through through this joint use agreement.
Yes, I think our goal would be that it doesn't happen again. I can say, because I'm the city librarian, I guess I can say that. And that there had been discussions over the entirety of my time at the city, periodically requesting such restrictions that the city has repeatedly not agreed to, because it is a public facility. And I feel that there's always a way to resolve whatever the concern is or the idea without restricting our community's access to a building that they essentially own and have a right to access.
Thank you, Jill.
Thank you for the questions.
I think I'm done, Vice Chair Magana. So I'm going to lower my hand and let you continue with the meeting.
Thank you. Thank you for such great questions. And speaking of lowering hands, I'm having issues seeing hands, so I'm going to get some help because I'm having literally issues not being able to see people raise their hands. So do we have?
Yes, we have Commissioner Scissor. Go ahead.
Thanks, through the chair. I guess I guess I'm a little bit confused about the controversy. To be honest, and I might be just really ignorant here. So I mean, I understand the concern about public access and so on. Maybe someone can answer me this. I was just Googling to see. There was a time, I don't know if it's still in place, there was a time when the city of San Jose was requiring vaccinations for entry into events at city-owned property, including libraries. Isn't that the case? No,
Special events, not regular
Right.
use of the facility.
I
So
understand.
we
Special
haven't been
events,
having,
gather.
we haven't been holding large special events.
Got it. But libraries
And
were
it
covered.
wasn't, yeah, the restriction though, just to be clear, wasn't because it wasn't checking vaccination status of anybody who wanted to use those spaces. It was specifically saying that only the San Jose State University community could use those spaces and anyone from the public could not, whether
But
you
the
had
San Jose-
vaccination or not.
But the San Jose State University students were required to be vaccinated.
They had made that determination and they were in the process of implementing. Yeah, just prior to the city taking similar steps within that quarter that we had the pilot in place. So it was a very unusual time.
Yeah, I agree. It was a very unusual time, and I understand maybe it was a poor judgment call, but I think maybe people were doing their best at the time and trying to protect their students seems awfully understandable to me. So I don't know the ins and outs. None of us do, except y'all on the staff. And this is not an area where, I don't know. I'm having trouble understanding the upset over this myself. Can I just understand? I think there was a reaction to the slide that's in front of us about the investment. Whoever put this presentation together, what was sort of the goal of presenting this financial information? Because it's presented in quite a vacuum. I mean, we don't know the usage compared to other branches. We don't know the operating costs of the other branches, whether it's proportional or not. I think someone made the good point that we don't know how much usage is happening from San Jose State University students and faculty versus library card members from the San Jose system. I guess, I mean, that would all help contextualize these numbers, because it could be that you get a lot of bang for your buck with this investment. We just don't know from this information. So I'm trying to understand what are we supposed to do with this information in front of us?
I think maybe those are good questions. This just articulates what the annual operating agreement defines as our cost, regardless of usage.
Yeah.
But we could overlay usage, and I can tell you that the public uses both collections more than anybody, and the students use a lot of the public collections more than they use the university collections. They've gone tremendously online for a lot of their school resources, so that makes sense. So this is just to share that there is an annual commitment of a pretty large amount of funding given the size of our operating budget. Okay. And there's some interesting factors like the shared security services cost that provides context for perhaps conversations that might come up during the year during commission.
And that was helpful to hear sort of the breakdown, a very high level breakdown of usage, San Jose State versus the community at large. Do you have, just off the top of your head, similarly, do you have any sort of, again, high level breakdown in terms of, what is the average operating cost for other branches, and what's the proportional usage? I mean, is it bang for buck, or is it a lot of investment for relatively little usage compared to other branches?
I think if you would like a more of a contextual look at the budget, what this just shows though is what the city pays the university. It doesn't actually incorporate the additional costs the city has to operate at King.
I see.
It's an operating agreement that has the city pays in annually. And what Commissioner Ramos Allen asked was a really good question. But that originally the city also paid in a large amount in redevelopment to actually construct the building. So that's why there is this expectation of joint operation. So yes, in the future, if you'd like to have a more contextualized idea of cost of running a facility per usage, we could do that. The King Library is used vastly more than any branch, obviously. So a cost per use, I guess we could work on something like that.
Yeah, I guess I just don't want to draw any conclusions. I mean, yes, it's a big number, but we don't know anything aside from that, and it sounds like there's also, this is not fully reflective of the total costs, that there's some additional operating costs not reflected on the slide. So, I mean, I'm not worried about it personally, so I'm not going to request that information. If there's some reason to think that this should be studied, that we're not getting bang for the buck, then sure. But I just want to make sure that's not what this slide was trying to suggest in any way. It doesn't sound like it was, and I guess I would just sort of suggest to everybody that we not draw any inferences without that additional context.
I do. The only thing I would say about that is that if a third of the building is chopped off of access, that changes the equation.
Okay, unless those floors weren't getting an enormous amount of usage. So again, I mean, there's just
not accurate.
Yeah. Okay, I don't know. I don't have those numbers.
No, and that's why Michelle shared the information about, a tremendous majority of all the study rooms in the building are on those floors. The majority of reader seats, of tables, of views of the city, of public art were on those floors. And so there is a tremendous amount of usage.
Got it. All right. Well, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Do we have other folks with their hands raised?
Yes, I see Commissioner Thorson.
Thanks so much for the presentation. I have always loved the MLK Library because of the public-academic partnership, and as an academic librarian, now working in interlibrary loan, I often wish that we had a connection to a public library because we get so many requests because we don't have multiple copies of things or the most popular literature. So I just think it's really amazing that our city has this.
Other comments or questions or hands raised? Are there any?
I'm not seeing any more hands, Vice Chair.
All right. Yeah, I want to echo some of the comments too around this awesome partnership. I think it's great that we're able to partner with the university. I as well have some worries. I think that's the right word with having access, especially with the initial investment that we put in, I'm sure, to build the capital project and that sort. So for me, that is definitely concerning. I'm excited that pilot's over. Just a random question on my end, and excuse my ignorance on this. Excited about Starbucks. My family lives in that. I'm curious the process with that in terms of getting a more local business, possibly a business owned by folks of color. I'm just curious, like, what that process and RFP process is like.
Yeah, that is a good question. One that we have also asked, I think, Anne, right? That is a case where the facility spaces, especially any vending, is managed by the university. And I will assume that there was an RFP process, but we could provide more information about how that was specifically determined. For us, it was to be participating in the conversation about moving the cafe from where it has historically been to a different location and having it be operated by Starbucks rather than the previous operator. So it wasn't a change in service, so to speak, but that is all managed by the university facilities department.
Thank you for that clarity. Again, love the convenience of Starbucks. It would be awesome. Locally owned shop though too. Any other questions or comments from folks for our King Library Joint Use Agreement presentation?
Jose, I'm sorry, Vice Chair Magana, but I just have another quick question. Director Bourne, will you be bringing back any additional information to us?
Yes. Specifically, I know you had asked about the initial investment. We can definitely bring that back. Michelle mentioned that in the next steps there, we had proposed a project that would allow for re-envisioning of space, but maintaining it as shared space throughout the building through a human-centered design process. And we intend to bring that back once it's underway in partnership with the university, but we could also bring back any other information that you would like.
Thank you. I feel uncomfortable because we don't have quorum, so I feel uncomfortable to give any direction, and so I'm happy that you will on your own bring that. Right?
Absolutely.
So thank you so much. I know you all have worked very hard on this, and I know that you are protecting access for not just people of the public, but for those who could potentially need just a safe space to be in. So I really appreciate your hard work. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions before we move on to our council liaisons announcements? All right. I can't really see hands, but
Yep,
I don't think
no
there's
hands.
Oh, awesome. Again, this is an informational item, so no vote is needed. So we'll move on again to our next item, which is our council liaisons announcements. Mariela, I believe, is here.
Yes, I
Yes.
am.
Welcome.
Good evening. Thank you. I'm Mariela with Councilwoman Arenas' office. I just had COVID-19 resources to share this month. As I'm sure you all know, earlier this month, the CDC approved boosters for children ages 12 to 15. Additionally, if you received the Pfizer vaccines as your initial COVID-19 vaccine series, you can also now get your booster 5 months after your second dose instead of 6 months. And so just wanted to encourage our public to find a vaccination site near them. You can visit stcfreevax.org for that. And then I also wanted to share an important update regarding at-home COVID-19 testing. Which is that every home in the US right now is eligible to order 4 free at-home COVID-19 tests. And these can be ordered now at covidtest.gov. And again, those are completely free. I also know that many members of our public need access now to COVID-19 testing, and that's been challenging in Santa Clara County. But for sites that require appointments, you can keep refreshing sccfreetest.org. Appointments do become available at different intervals. But there are also some pop-up vaccine clinics. I wanted to share that Asian Americans for Community Involvement, which is ACI for short, is taking walk-ups for free COVID-19 testing at 2 of their locations in San Jose, and no appointment is needed for those. So if you would like more information or you have questions about those 2 sites, you can call 408-975-2730. And that's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for these resources and for everything that you all are doing. Appreciate that. Any questions for Mariela before we move on? I don't see any hands. And again, I can't really see hands again.
There's no hands.
Awesome. Thank you again for spending your time with us and for providing us with that information. We'll move on then to our next item, which is chair announcements. I'll keep it quick. Just first off, Happy New Year. Thank you all for our commissioners for joining us. I know there's a lot that's going on, so I appreciate you all taking the time to join us virtually in this space late in the evening. And also thank you to staff for everything that you all are doing. I know many of you are taking on more than just your initial roles. We're asking our libraries to do a lot more than I think should happen, but I know that our library staff is up to the challenge, and I appreciate everything that you all are doing. So thank you for that. Thank you again to our commissioners, and thank you all for the grace that you're giving me as I chair. I think this is only my 2nd meeting, so thanks for that. With that being said, we'll move on to our director's report. Jill, any announcements on your end?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Magana. I did want to note that due to the current surge in COVID-19 cases in the community and to ensure safety of library staff and volunteers and members of the public, we had put a pause on any expansions of services until further notice. And you know that when we first started to reopen our services mid last year, we've continued to ramp up services, and we had plans to continue expansions in January 2022. And those have been put on pause until at least mid-February, and more information will come about that. Virtual and outdoor library programs will continue to be offered during this time. We want to thank our patrons for their ongoing support and understanding, and public updates are shared on the library social media pages and on sjpl.org/reopening. So if you ever want to know the current status. Also, I'm very pleased to announce that on January 13th, 2022, the library presented the proposed Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Quality Standards to the City Council Neighborhood Services and Education Committee. Both received unanimous support and approval from the committee, along with a referral to full City Council for consideration on February 8th, 2022. If approved by City Council, the EDI program quality standards will become a guidepost for programs citywide to prioritize and assess efforts based on impact in achieving the core principles of equity, inclusion, diversity, and anti-racism. So we extend our appreciation to all who served on the EDI Quality Standards Ad Hoc Committee, led by our fantastic Carla Alvarez, and including Vice Chair Jose Magana and Commissioner Patricia Mendoza, and the entire commission for providing your feedback and engagement. We are very proud of all the library employees who have participated in and led efforts to center equity in our work. And actually, we have a link to that report, and I will pop it in the chat in just a second. Next, on January 3rd, the library kicked off its second annual laptop donation drive in partnership with HP and San Jose Public Library Foundation. All donated Windows laptops will be refreshed and repurposed by HP volunteers. To date, a total of 44 laptops have been donated this year. Donations are tax deductible and may be made given at any SJPL location until February 12th. So for more information on that, please visit sjpl.org/laptop drive. Next, we recently created our equity and inclusion website section that now includes an LGBTQ+ resource page, which is devoted to programs and collections in celebration of LGBTQ+ voices and members in our community. The page includes multilingual reading lists for different age groups, LGBTQ+ events, such as Over the Rainbow story times, and information about service providers in the city and featured staff blogs. So we invite you to check out this new resource page at sjpl.org/LGBTQ. I want to acknowledge our staff and contributors for all their work and help in developing content for the new website. Carla Alvarez, as I already mentioned, Tim Reef, Lori Willis, Michelle Clark, Jessica Novak, Willow Laganza, and Treasure Wynn. And then lastly, the annual City Auditor's City Service Review and results of the annual resident survey will be heard by City Council, I believe, on January 25th. And though I will not reveal anything, I will say that when I saw some of the results, it was remarkable how highly our residents continue to value their libraries in relation to all city services, even when we were not able to be open for the entire year. So we are very thankful to our communities and appreciative of the commitment and hard work of our library staff to meet the needs of our residents. And that concludes my report. I'll pop the link in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Jill? And I can't see any.
Can I make a comment instead of a question?
Please, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Magana, and thanks, Jill. Great report. I am just so enormously proud of this, of your agency's commitment on equity and diversity and inclusion. It's just kind of overwhelming every time we have these meetings. I can't really hear too much about it. I just want to hear more. And I will read that report Congratulations on getting that to the city council and getting so much support. And thank you to the chair, to the acting chair and other commissioners who participate in that and all the staff. It should be an enormous source of pride for everybody involved. I just want to revisit a comment I made last time, which is the more you can do to highlight that stuff on your website, I think the better. And right now it's not terribly buried, but it's a little bit buried. And my suggestion would be to put it as one of the main tabs at the top of the website, equity inclusion, and not put it under learning and then personal growth. It's basically 2 or 3 steps away from sort of a primary resource. So, because once you get there, it's an amazing resource, a ton of information. But I think it's not intuitive how you get there. And I just think there's just so much to be proud of and to feature. So thank you, Jill. And really thanks for your commitment on the issue, and all the sort of the ongoing stream of information that you guys provide each month on various related topics. So thanks again.
Thank you, Commissioner. I will say that I agree with that assessment. And when the site recently launched, or that page recently launched, it was linked as a highlight on the main page. And then when I was looking for it myself recently for the to review the standards that are going forward, I found that I had to search for it a bit. So I think that that's something we will do. Thank you for that.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that. Thanks, Jill. Appreciate that.
Other questions or comments for Jill? Thank you for those great comments. That was nice. Any other comments or questions?
I don't see any hands raised on our staff side.
Awesome. I know, yes, and I see we had the answer to the chat. We had a question regarding comments on illegal aliens or criminal aliens. That was a previous item, so we are going to continue with the order of business. So we'll move on now to announcements. I believe we do have our youth commissioner here. Is that correct?
Yes, Commissioner Hong is here today.
Welcome, welcome. If you'd like to say hello, give us a little bit of an update of what y'all are working on, that would be great. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, of course. Good evening, commissioners. I have prepared a report that we'll be accessing right about now. So for a short introduction on the San Jose Youth Commission, we are a commission of 11 youth, each appointed from one district throughout the entire city with one commissioner per the citywide representative. I am currently the chairperson of the commission. The vice chair is Commissioner Paula Escobar, who may be joining us in later meetings. I'd like to say, first of all, that it is an honor to speak with you all. So for more recent events, we are currently planning a budget summit on the 29th of January from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. PDT via Zoom. This event is going to be a place for youth to come and unite on an online platform in order to talk about the budget, upcoming fiscal year, and what their priorities should be in terms of city departments and their rankings. Moreover, in our past, we have hosted town halls this fiscal year, and recently we had we started our winter retreat, which is a place where we come together as commissioners to review what we have completed in our work plan. District 4 has recently held its annual AIM event for D4 youth, full of resources such as mental health resources and college advising resources. In the past fiscal year, the commission's work has included passing the Youth Bill of Rights, which is a list of aspirational hopes and in a document for the city of San Jose to assess itself by. And that is all from the commission so far. Are there any questions?
Floor is open for questions. First off, what a wonderful presentation. Thank you so much for joining us for this and providing us with an update. We'll open up the floor for questions for folks. Any questions for our commissioner? All right. Thank you again for participating and for taking the time to join us, providing such a thorough update. It's exciting to hear what our youth commission is working on and will continue to work on. Appreciate you again taking the time to give us an update. I'll open up the floor to any other announcements from commissioners. All right, if there's none,
Vice Chair Magana, I just wanted to share with the commission that I attended I didn't get a chance to share it in January because I forgot, but I did attend the Candy Cane event at Bascom Library, and that was a lot of fun. I mean, Santa happened to be my coworker, but my dog Josie really loved him, and I just want to say thank you to the library and the Friends of Bascom Library for putting it on. It was joyous for myself and my husband and our dog.
awesome. That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. And I hope other folks had opportunities to join some other events. Any other things to share out from folks? Again, I can't see any hands. So
Sorry, are we sharing events we attended? Is that included?
Yeah, just any announcements, events you may have attended. Yeah.
I back to the equity and diversity theme. I found my way to one of the community conversations, the December community conversation with Yvonne Maxwell as the featured guest, who is one of my favorite San Jose people. She talked about the founding of her nonprofit, Ujima, which provides mental health services to Black youth in Santa Clara County. And she's a great storyteller, is a really important organization. She's a really important figure. I was thrilled that the library hosted her, and it was a really good discussion. And I appreciate that the library organized that, and appreciated Yvonne doing that. Unfortunately, it was the only one of those community conversations I was able to make because I learned about that series too late. But it looks like there were a lot of great guests, and I think those discussions are recorded, so I probably will go back. So anyway, I was really glad to be able to do that. I did introduce myself as a commissioner there. Just wanted to show support to that series, which I hope continues in the future.
Thank you. There is later on future events that folks can attend, but any other events that have been attended or any announcements from our current commissioners before we go to Commissioner Thorson on an update from the Public Library Foundation Board? Any other updates from folks? All right, Commissioner Thorson, if you'd like to give us a quick update on the San Jose Public Library Foundation Board.
Yes, thank you. So 2022 is a really exciting year for the Library Foundation. It's the 35th anniversary, and there will be celebrations all year round. The biggest one will be October 20th, which will be the gala event. And right now, the Library Foundation is in the process of getting volunteers to help plan the event. So if you enjoy event planning and want to support the Library Foundation and the celebrations this year, the Gala Planning Committee is going to begin meeting monthly on Zoom. The first meeting is going to be February 1st at noon, and you can email volunteer@sjplf.org to say that you're interested and in participating. Also, some exciting news. Kendra O'Donohue has joined the foundation team, and she's leading external affairs. So she'll be overseeing all the institutional fundraising, and she comes to the foundation with a wealth of experience in program management, development, and fundraising. So it's really exciting to have her on board. And coming up, last Saturday in January 29th, the Seven Leaves Cafe, both the Berryessa and Saratoga Road locations, are having a fundraiser to support the San Jose Public Library. And any purchases made that day between 8 a.m. and 10 p.m., 20% of all the proceeds will go to the library. So tell your friends to visit the Seven Leaves Cafe and on the 29th and support the library. So I'll just put that in chat in case you're able to attend. And then also just a few things that are coming up. The Career Online High School graduation, which is always a really wonderful event, is going to be held virtually Thursday, February 3rd at 6 p.m. And as happened last year, there is a laptop drive going on with HP, And HP will be refreshing and repurposing used laptops and tablets for our community. And you can donate any old Windows laptops and computers to the or just laptops, sorry, to the at any of the 25 San Jose Public Library branches. So if you got an upgrade recently and or have some old equipment in your basement, definitely bring it on over to the library. And that's everything. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Commissioner Thorson regarding the San Jose Public Library Foundation Board? See any? No, if there's any hands that are up. All right. If not, I'll open up the floor for commissioners and staff to share any upcoming events or opportunities for commissioners to participate in. Are there any opportunities for folks? Okay, I don't believe so. Thank you all for your participation and providing updates and all the work that you have done. Now just open up the floor to any future agenda items that are not covered in our work plan. Is there anything that we would like to add to our future agenda? Any hands that are up? Don't believe so.
I don't see any hands.
Okay, cool. So just a reminder for folks, our next meeting is February 16th via Zoom. Thanks again for all your support, all your commitment, all your effort. This is for our staff, for commission, and for our folks that are attending virtually as well from the public. Thank you again for your attendance. With that being said, I believe that concludes our meeting and we can adjourn our meeting at 8:47. Thanks again, y'all. Happy New Year.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Happy New Year.